Hey there everyone, this is Samuel Johnson and welcome back to the Xiaolin Perspectives, and today we're going to be discussing episode 25 of Xiaolin Showdown, The Evil Within. And this episode begins, as most episodes do, with the Xiaolin monks fighting Jack Spicer over a Shengong Wu. In this case, the Shengong Wu they're fighting over is... I'm going to just call it a lunchbox. Let's call it the mosaic scales. I call it a lunchbox mostly because it's just a box with a picture of scales painted on the front. But... the shit's still a Shengong Wu, so of course everyone fights over it. Kimiko tries to grab it with the Lotus Twister, since it's located in a tree, but when she grabs the mosaic scale, she ends up losing her balance and ends up falling over, losing her grip on the Shengong Wu and allowing Jack Spicer to get it. Thankfully, with the intervention of the other Xiaolin monks, they're able to take Jack Spicer's robots down and get their hands on the mosaic scale, with Jack Spicer being sent on his way. As such, the Xiaolin monks do consider this a victory, though Kimiko's a little angry that she messed up, and Jack Spicer got the Shengong Wu as a result. And while the other Xiaolin monks are going to try and tell her, it's alright, it's fine, it's fine, we still got the Shengong Wu, whatever, Kimiko is still a little bent out of shape about it. Either way though, the Xiaolin monks return to the temple no worse for wears. In the meantime, Jack Spicer, well, he goes to Chase Young's home. Why? Well, apparently since the last time we saw Chase Young, Jack has been wanting to partner up with him. Mostly because, like we saw in the last episode, Chase Young is Jack Spicer's personal hero, and he thinks that if he really wants to be the best of the worst, then he needs to hang out with the best of the worst, which in this case is Chase. However, Chase really doesn't want anything to do with Jack. At best, he thinks of Jack as a clingy fanboy, at worst, he's an annoyance. And as such, when Jack proposes the idea of partnering up with Chase, Chase tells him to hit the road and says that if he's really interested in partnering up with Chase, then Jack has to provide Chase with something unique, something worth his while, something that he has never seen before. And as such, Jack is kind of sent on his way, wondering what he can get someone who has everything. In the meantime, back with the Xiaolin monks, Kimiko is in charge of putting the mosaic scale away, but she's still kind of bitter over having screwed up earlier. However, before she can put the mosaic scale in its proper place in the vault, she gets called by Raimundo, and she gets startled and ends up dropping the mosaic scale, which drops to the bottom of the vault and breaks, much to her shock and horror. As such, Kimiko immediately grabs what's left of the mosaic scale, and, well, she tries to find a place to hide it. As such, she runs back to the temple, specifically the bunks of her and the other Xiaolin monks. Before she can hide it away, the other Xiaolin monks catch her and ask, hey, if she wants to play a game of Texas Hold'em, which she says that she will, but there's something she's got to do first. As such, she takes the pieces of the mosaic scale and hides them in Clay's bunk. As such, she goes to presumably play cards with the other Xiaolin monks, but that night, as everyone is sleeping in their bunks, well, something crawls out of the remains of the mosaic scale. What looks like, I guess, an earwig that immediately makes its way into Clay and then climbs into his ear, which causes Clay to get a little irritated while he sleeps, only for him to immediately wake up, and, well, let's just say it's clear that Clay is no longer in the driver's seat. As he gets up, smiles evilly, and his teeth are now, like, more broken and crooked, and his eye is no longer just, like, the small pupil that we know, but it's just, like, big and wide, and in a distorted voice, he talks about how happy he is to be free again, and that this time, no one will stop him. So yeah, apparently the mosaic scale had sealed evil in a box. Either way, the next day we see more of whatever this earwig is, as it begins causing mischief around the Xiaolin temple. As while the other Xiaolin monks are training by jumping from tree to tree, the Clay ends up kind of screwing with them as he causes each of them one by one to come falling out of the trees, either by pulling on the branches they use for support, or just straight up cutting them off. And when all of them are on the ground, he ends up toppling a tree on everybody, before just kind of having a laugh and running off, much to everyone's confusion. However, pranks are not the extent of Clay's antics, as that night, he ends up breaking into the Xiaolin temple and begins just grabbing any Shengong Wu he can find. And guess who he runs into? But Jack fucking Spicer! Again! Revolving door! Do they just let him in at this point? I don't know. Point is, Jack's there to steal Shengong Wu and he catches Clay in the act. However, Clay tells Jack that it's fun, that if he wants to steal Shengong Wu, he's not going to stop him. In fact, he has an offer for him. If Jack can help him find something called the Monarch Wings, then he can make it worth Jack's while, which Jack immediately accepts. As such, the pair of evildoers make their way out of the vault with the other Xiaolin monks catching them, but unfortunately, quote-unquote Clay, I know I'm just using air quotes to say his name, but I'll say his real name when I get to it, ends up wiping the floor with the other Xiaolin monks as he and Jack run off. In this case, though, Jack brings the possessed monk to the home of Chase Young, as he thinks that maybe with what he has now, Chase will consider, partnering up. However, when Chase lets him in, again, Chase wants nothing to do with him. After all, first Jack presents him with a bag of Shen Gong Wu, but as we established last episode, Chase doesn't give a shit about Shen Gong Wu. And then when Jack says that he's got a new evil partner in the home of Clay, well, again, Chase isn't buying it, as he can tell from a glance that Clay is not the one talking. And he even eventually reveals what this spirit's name is: Sabini. And apparently once upon a time he does know this creature, and apparently it's been 1,000 years since they see each other. Well, 1,001, but who's counting? Either way, Chase doesn't really give a shit about this. In his own words, for one to be truly evil, they must accept the path, which at first I found kind of ironic, considering that the whole reason Chase is evil is because he sold his soul for this soup that turns him into a lizard monster. But then again, he made that choice before the soup corrupted his soul, so what do I know? Either way, he tells Jack and Sabini to hit the road, though Jack has absolutely no idea what the hell a Sabini is. Well, we do end up getting more answers as back at the Xiaolin Temple. As Master Feng notices all the Shen Gong Wu that have been taken, he ends up lamenting the fact that the mosaic scale has been taken, as he claims that it is a very unpredictable Shen Gong Wu that can be used to sow chaos. However, it's at this point when Kimiko finally comes clean, and it shows off that she broke the mosaic scale. As such, from there, the Xiaolin monks go back into the temple proper, as we learn more about what Sabini is. Basically, he is a chaos spirit that centuries ago had been sealed in the mosaic scale, which kind of feels weird considering that apparently it was Grandmaster Dashi that forged the Shen Gong Wu, but whatever. Maybe he sealed him away. Maybe he sealed Sabini in the mosaic scale when he made it. But either way, with the mosaic scale broken, Sabini was able to get free and can now just go out into the world and cause mayhem. The problem is, however, Sabini is an earwig. He can't cause any major problems unless he's possessing someone, like with Clay. But there is a way for him to get around it, which is where the Monarch Wings comes in. It turns out the mosaic scale is only one of a pair of Shen Gong Wu, with the second Shen Gong Wu being the Monarch Wings themselves, which kind of look like an ornate butterfly. And apparently, when the Monarch Wings and the mosaic scale are combined, Sabini can use their power to make himself practically unstoppable, to the point where he doesn't even need a host to do his dirty work. As such, Master Feng and Dojo tell everyone that the Monarch Wings will reveal themselves shortly after the mosaic scale has, and so they need to find that butterfly before Sabini can get his hands on it. As such, everyone leaves the temple and ends up running out to try and find Jack and Sabini. But as Omi's looking for Sabini, he ends up running into Chase Young. And at first, Omi thinks that Chase wants to fight, but no. Rather, Chase just throws Omi a bow staff, and instead tells him that instead gives Omi some advice, as the two of them have a light sparring session. And like with when the Xiaolin monks first fought Chase Young, Chase is really not putting in any effort to try and block any of Omi's attacks. But through the sparring, it does start giving Omi some good advice about fighting the earwig. As he states that if they want to beat Sabini, they need to tire out his host, make him fight till he can't fight anymore, and Sabini will abandon him. And likewise, if Omi wants to get the chance to fight Sabini, then he needs to actually outthink him. As well, Chase Young states that when you're facing a warrior with greater strength, the most important thing you need is greater skill. Which Omi does listen to, but he's a little confused why Chase is telling him all this. After all, Chase Young is evil, one of the big bads of the Xiaolin Showdown universe. So why is he telling all this to Omi? But Chase just kind of says he has his own reasons, though before Omi can get any more answers, the other Xiaolin monks in Dojo arrive and Chase Young makes himself scarce. As well, the Monarch Wings have finally revealed themselves, so Omi joins his friends as they go to search for it, as apparently the Monarch Wings are in nearby a river where that geyser field, whatever. But point is, once they arrive, they find that Jack and Sabini are there first, and rather than use the element of surprise, they just straight up confront Sabini head on. And of course, Sabini once again seems to wipe the floor with the Xiaolin monks, as they even pull out their elemental moves, but he still just powers right through it and even uses some of the Shen Gong Wu he stole to turn the tables on him. At one point, even using the reversing mirror to send a geyser of water that Omi threw at him right back at him. Unfortunately, as Jack kind of gloats in his partner's victory, Well, Sabini seems to get tired of Jack as he pulls out the tangle web comb and ties Jack up with it, having finally got what he wanted, so he just throws Jack to the wind. As such, he grabs the monarch wings and begins walking away, but the other Xiaolin monks recover and decide they need to still fight him. And it's here where Omi finally remembers that what Chase Young taught him, and so that he ends up fighting Clay and even pulls out a move that Chase Young wound up teaching Omi in their sparring session, something called Repulse the Monkey, which basically involves utilizing your opponent's strength and momentum against them. As in this case, every time Sabini tries charging at Omi, he ends up literally just using Clay's weight and throwing the possessed Xiaolin monk to the ground. And basically doing this twice in a row ends up tiring Clay's body out, and so Sabini is forced out. And of course, Sabini's first plan is to just go right for Omi, but thankfully the bald-headed monk had kind of thought of that, and he plugged up his ears with earplugs. As such, he just swats Sabini into a tree, and it seems that everybody's won the day. However, as the Xiaolin monks are basking in the victory, Sabini recovers, and instead of trying to find a new host, he pretty much just goes screw it and runs to the monarch wings. As such, the Xiaolin monks chase after him, and while Jack Spicer tries to make a grab for the wings, well, Sabini ends up crawling onto his face, and this causes Jack Spicer to freak out so much he not only gets out of his bindings, but makes a run for it. However, as Sabini is thrown into the air, he ends up landing on the monarch wings just as Kimiko makes a grab for them. And so, Kimiko challenges Sabini to a Xiaolin showdown, with her wagering the Eye of Dashi and Sabini wagering the Tangle Webcomb. In the contest, the monarch wings are going to be located within a field of geysers. Whoever can get to the monarch wings first and then get out of the field of geysers will be considered the winner. As such, after Sabini accepts the challenge, I think, in his earwig form he can't actually talk, just make noises, a Xiaolin showdown is once again called, and once again the area is warped as all the water and geysers in the area actually reshape themselves and transform into a weird little maze of pathways and platforms that Kimiko and Sabini can use. And apparently Sabini ends up growing to giant size, which I don't know if he can do that normally or not, or if it's just effective the Xiaolin showdown, but either way, it puts him and Kimiko on an even playing field, and so the pair of them run into the field of geysers to try and get to the monarch wings. And it does get to some close calls, especially since some of the geysers are actually hostile and attacking the pair to try and act as obstacles. But unfortunately, Sabini manages to get to the monarch wings first, and the instant he has them, well, he calls out to the mosaic scale, which flies away from Kimiko, as she had it on her at the time, and repairs itself, and thus Sabini ends up combining the monarch wings and the mosaic scale. As such, once both Shengon were combined, Sabini shrinks down to his normal size and goes inside the mosaic scale, and while he is inside, I'm guessing he starts becoming empowered, I guess, and as such, Kimiko decides that this is the only opportunity she has to right her wrong, as she uses the Eye of Dashi and combines it with her fire element to pretty much just seal Sabini inside, as she ends up hold on one second. Sorry, blanked on the word again. But she ends up fusing the mosaic scale shut so that it can never open again, and thus Sabini is now trapped in there, I guess, which I think, I don't know. Again, it's confusing. I don't really know what happens. But either way, Sabini is now trapped in the mosaic scale / monarch wings, so I guess the day is saved, and because he technically couldn't get out of the cage of geysers, I guess he technically loses the showdown. I don't know. Either way, bad guy's beaten, and Clay's back to his old self, though he's tired. As such, from there, the Xiaolin monks take him back to the temple, and they end up giving him a blanket and a block of ice on his head. But he doesn't seem to remember anything about Sabini. And Kimiko at first is ready to let him not remember a thing, but thanks to Master Feng's scolding, Kimiko ends up just coming clean, and, well, she clearly says it in a way that if you weren't paying attention to what the words she was speaking, you wouldn't know what she was talking about. So, there you go. But anyway, yeah, that was The Evil Within. I didn't care about this episode. I mean, okay, yeah, I don't hate this episode, but I can't in good conscience say that I liked it. For me, the biggest problem with this episode was the central conflict with Kimiko. Like, the thing is, I like that we have an episode that's finally focusing on one of the individual Xiaolin monks again that isn't Omi or Raimundo. Because the thing is, the last time we had a Kimiko-focused episode, it was the third episode with the Tangle Webcomb, and that was all the way at the beginning of season 1. After that, the last time that she took center stage was the Chameleon episode, and I wouldn't even call that a Kimiko episode. It's just that the bad guy chose to capture her and impersonate her for that episode. So, I do like that we do have an episode finally focusing more on her again and, developing more of her character. The problem is that it doesn't feel like we're learning it feels like she doesn't really learn anything, if that makes any sense. The central conflict for the episode is basically this. Kimiko has to deal with her pride getting the best of her, as she doesn't like the idea of making mistakes and screwing up, which we can all relate to, myself included. I myself even have problems admitting my own mistakes. But the thing is, by the end of the episode, it doesn't really feel like Kimiko learns a lesson. Oh yes, she comes clean that she broke the mosaic scale, and yeah, she does put in the work to try and take Sabini down, but what kind of sours the message by that point is the fact that at the end of the episode, when it comes time to tell Clay what exactly happened, she just basically like, no, there's nothing to really talk about. You just kind of get knocked out. It's fine. Like, again, it feels lesser, which is kind of expounded by the fact that when it comes out that Kimiko was the one that broke the mosaic scale and unintentionally let Sabini out, Master Fong tries to tell her that making mistakes is not the sign of not a sign of weakness, but rather what I was trying to fix from the mistakes is what defines us. So that ultimately, and again, Kimiko does put in the effort to try and undo her mistake. She tries to fight Sabini. She ends up facing him in the Xiaolin showdown, and she manages to save him. But again, the message is soured by the very last scene in the episode where Kimiko tries to, brush it under the rug and pretend it never happened. So, again, it really doesn't feel like that anything was really learned here. It just feels like Kimiko fucked up, only fessed up when she had to face consequences of her fuck up, and then likewise, when everything was said and done, she just wanted to pretend it never happened, which I guess is kind of relatable, but at the same time, it does kind of sour the message a little, and it doesn't really it feels like that Kimiko really didn't learn a thing, and that she is bound to repeat this mistake in the future should similar circumstances occur, so there you go, I guess. I don't know. And so, as a result, the message itself just kind of feels, it just doesn't feel as strong as it should, and it really doesn't make the central conflict with Kimiko feel good. It feels like she didn't learn anything, and by the end, it just kind of feels like we wasted our time a little. Likewise, there's also the other portion of the episode that sadly does get on my nerves, and it's not because the segment is bad, it's because it feels out of place. Case in point, the stuff with Chase Young. Well, the thing is, I like that we are seeing more of Chase Young in the episode, and we are seeing him develop more. In this case, we see the beginning of Chase Young's manipulations, as he has kind of focused his attention exclusively on Omi, as he's clearly taken an interest in Omi's skills, and even at one point in the episode, stated that it feels like a waste that Omi is wasting his potential to fight against the forces of evil, and yes, I know I just used waste twice in the same sentence, bear with me, and it's as a result, seeing him trying to tutor Omi and teach him lessons, give him advice on how to take Sabini down, it makes you very curious about what his end goal here is. And even in the episode after Sabini is taken care of, Omi does end up seeing Chase again and even asks him why he wants to help the Xiaolin warriors, and Chase pretty much just tells him the rough equivalent of eye for an eye. He did something for Omi, so maybe at some point in the future, Omi will be compelled to do something for him. Again, it still feels strange, and while there's still a threatening aura to him, this is one of the first times again that we see Chase Young being amicable. But at the same time, it doesn't feel like he's doing this, that he's helping out Omi because, it's the right thing to do. He's helping Omi because it's clear he wants something from Omi. And at the same time, what I kind of like too in the episode is that it also kind of further establishes more of Chase Young's code of honor, so to speak. In his case, he states that for one to truly be evil, then they need to accept that part of them, which again kind of makes sense. Again, I was willing to give him some crap since he had been kind of tricked into becoming the bad guy, but again, he is the one that took the Lao Ming Lo soup when he did, so Lao Ming Long soup. I don't know. Sorry, I forgot how it's pronounced. But again, he was the one that took the soup of his own volition. In fact, he was probably even told this thing will keep you young, and he still took it, which in itself was a selfish decision. So again, I do kind of like that. I do kind of like that he does still have a slight beef against Sabini, especially since that, as we learn later in the series, Chase Young was around when Master Dashi was doing his own thing, and likewise, he probably, by the time he had probably turned evil, Sabini had been sealed away in the Shengong Wu. As he even said, like he said, the last time he and Sabini saw each other was almost 1,000 years prior. So that would mean that it took. So that means that at some point Sabini was sealed. At some point Sabini was sealed away within the Shengong Wu. Probably a long time afterwards, which also just raises the question what that has to do with anything, but I'll get to that when I get to that. But, and again, seeing him actually tutor Omi, help him out, it's interesting, and it makes you question what Chase's motives are in the end, as it's clear he is trying to tempt Omi a little, but at the same time, the advice he gives is actually very sound. It's not laced with anything. He isn't trying to trick Omi with giving the advice. Rather, it just feels like he's trying to earn Omi's trust, which in turn does make you wonder exactly what his end goal with the Xiaolin monk is beyond, oh, he'd probably be better off on the evil side. So it does make you a little bit more curious about him. And I do like that. It adds more to his story and kind of helps set up what he's going to be doing later in the series. The problem is, however, that stuff does not feel necessary for this episode. Like I said, the central conflict for the episode is that Kimiko fucked up and has to face the consequence of her actions and learn a lesson because of her fuck up. And yet, we are spending part of the episode focusing on Chase Young and building up his connection to Omi, which I'm not against seeing that. It's just that it feels weird to have that to basically build up more of their connection, even though the episode is supposed to focus on the Xiaolin Dragon of Fire. It feels like it's out of place and really does not feel like it belongs in the episode, which, again, the stuff isn't bad. I like the stuff with Chase Young. In fact, I dare say it's probably some of the best parts of the episode. It's just that it feels lesser. It doesn't feel like it belongs in the episode. Well, okay, it's not lesser. It's not lesser. But like I said, it just doesn't feel like it belongs in this episode specifically. If we had an episode focusing on Omi and then had the stuff with Chase Young, I feel like it would have been more impactful. But again, central conflict focused on Kimiko, and yet we're seeing the stuff with Chase Young and Omi. It just feels out of place is what I'm saying, so that's a problem. And to kind of go off of that on other problems, how is Sabini connected to the Mosaic Scale in Monarch Wings? I understand, the Mosaic Scale is what he had been trapped in for probably 1,000 years, but how did he get trapped in the Mosaic Scale? Why is he connected to the Mosaic Scale? Why does adding the Monarch Wings to the Mosaic Scale make him more powerful? If he was so intrinsically connected to the Mosaic Scale that he needs it in order to maintain supreme power, why was he imprisoned in the first place? And likewise, how does sealing the Mosaic Scale shut suddenly stop him? Why did he have to go into the Mosaic Scale in order to gain ultimate power? I don't understand that. I guess maybe the idea is that the combined power of these two Shengong Wu would allow him to just leave it and turn into a full spirit so that he can just run around the world without having to possess anyone and just cause all the various mayhem and mischief that he's so good at. But again, it's not really explained. It doesn't really make sense why sealing the Shengong Wu like that is what ends up stopping him. I guess maybe it's because the Eye of Dashi is a Shengong Wu and it was charged with Kimiko's fire key, but it doesn't really explain that. Again, because here's the thing, when he gets sealed in the Shengong Wu, we see him in a spirit form before he gets just pulled right back in. So what? Is it that he can just rest his body comfortably in the Mosaic Scale / Monarch Wings while his spirit can just fly out into the world and fuck with people? I don't get it. And likewise, if that's the case, how does sealing it shut with the Eye of Dashi somehow stop him? I don't understand that. Again, the only explanation is magic. We don't have to explain it, but it just doesn't make sense to me. It just kind of it adds questions upon questions that I didn't really want to ask. Why is this, why is he so intrinsically linked with the Shengang Wu he was imprisoned in? And likewise, why does adding another Shengang Wu suddenly make everything better? I don't know, it just kind of makes me question a lot of things. And for that matter, what do the mosaic scale and the monarch wings do? It's never explained in the series. All the other Shengang Wu that we have not seen, who have not really been shown what they do in their debut episodes, we at least see get used in a later episode, so we can still see them be used, like the Silver Manta Ray or the Thorn of Thunderball. Both of those are Shengang Wu that when they first appeared in an episode, we weren't told what they did, but then in a later episode we saw them in full use. So again, it's at least told to us. So at the very least, there's still something there that we can use, but with the mosaic scale and the monarch wings, we're never told what they do. I guess the idea is the mosaic scale can create chaos. The most we get with the mosaic scale is that it creates chaos. Okay, what does it do? Does it give her wields of the power to manipulate Sabini? I don't know. Why does adding the Monarch Wings to do that? Does making the Monarch Wings give Sabini complete independence? So are you telling me that if Sabini had been trapped in the mosaic scale and then they added the Monarch Wings on top of that, that would have been enough to empower the fucker? I don't know. It's never explained. We're just told these two particular Shengang Wu are things he needs, and yet we're never told exactly what they'll do, aside from, oh, they'll make him more powerful. I don't get it. It doesn't make sense to me. And it just and the more you think about it, the more it really gets on your nerves. So, yeah, I'm gonna consider that a problem as well. It's not explained very well about why these particular Shengang Wu are so intrinsically tied to Sabini beyond, oh, he was trapped in one. So, I don't know. I'm just gonna consider that a problem. Likewise, but that said, there are aspects of the episode that I do think work. And while I will call this episode out on what I think is the BS, the parts of the episode that I think work are fun. It's like Sabini. I like him. He's a nice villain of the week. He's basically the thing is, he's described as a mischievous spirit, and I can buy it. Basically, his whole deal is that he just likes to prank people and mess with them. We see that when he first debuts, when he first possesses Clay. The first thing he does is screw with the Xiaolin monks before he runs off and steals their Shengang Wu. The first time he battles them, he just kind of messes with them a little before he whoops their asses. He takes joy in screwing with Jack Spicer throughout their entire partnership. When he meets up with Chase Young and is called out for the fact that he's possessing Clay, he's not angry at seeing him. If anything, he's just like, oh, hey, Chase, it's been a while. How you been? Which I kind of find amusing. And likewise, when he finally gets what he wants from his partnership with Jack, he still just kind of acts like a mischievous little dick waffle. I like that. I kind of find that amusing. And it makes him to actually be an entertaining villain. Yeah, he's got higher machinations of achieving ultimate power, but at the end of the day, he's just a supernatural prankster, and I kind of dig him for that. So, at the very least, Sabini's a lot of fun. So at the very least, I think Sabini's a lot of fun. Of course, the action is still pretty good. And likewise, while I think the moral was handled crappily, at the very least, I don't think it's a bad moral. That, yeah, everyone makes mistakes, but it's how we react to those mistakes that define us. And yeah, that is a lesson that sadly some of us do need to learn, myself included. And so, I do like that. It's just, my problem with it, again, is that it's a lesson when Kimiko doesn't seem to actually retain the lesson. So, I don't know. Ultimately, like I said, I already mentioned the stuff with Chase Young, I think, being pretty good. But when it comes down to it, the episode I still think is not that great. I hesitate to say it's awful, but I just don't think it's great. The stuff with the Shengang Wu this episode centers around really kind of makes you ask more questions than you need to. The central lesson doesn't really make a lot of doesn't feel like it's implemented as well, since the character that's supposed to be learning the lesson doesn't seem to retain it by the end of the episode. And then likewise while the stuff with Chase Young and Omi is good and does build up character dynamics for them, as well as kind of adding a bit of foreshadowing to whatever Chase Young's ultimate plan is, it also just kind of feels out of place in an episode that's mostly focused on Kimiko. So, yeah, on the whole, these combined factors do make me think the episode just isn't that great. It's not awful. There are things about it that I do like, but I also don't care for it as a whole, so make of that what you will. So, yeah, I think that's really all I have to say. I thank you for watching. I'm Samuel Johnson, and I hope to see you next week. Take care.